If I can't keep my head held high enough, I'll just speak love and watch the smiles come, bring my spirits up. There's some shit I like to fix, but I still know that I'm blessed.
I'm going to read chapter 2 of the Holiday Willie Nelson book. Pretty paper. I like his books. Chapter 2, Following a Dream. A couple of weeks had passed, and I'd nearly forgotten all about the man selling his wares in front of Leonard's, when all of a sudden he turned up in a dream. Now, I'm not one who remembers my dreams, and if I do, I don't pay much mind. But this dream was different. This dream was incredibly vivid. The peddler showed up in living color, and he was playing guitar. And he was standing tall. His legs were long and sturdy, and he was singing a song. I can't remember the words or melody, but I was sure it was the most beautiful song I had ever heard. He said that the song was the story of his life. At one point in the dream, I was standing right next to him in the band, playing my guitar, and at another point, I was in the audience cheering him on. When the song was over, I went over to congratulate him, but he had disappeared. I tried to find him, but he was long gone. I was out there on some lonely highway, looking every which way for this man. I had to know his name. I had to hear the song again, but there was nothing but the cold, starless night and the sound of howling coyotes. I woke up feeling the same frustration I felt when I went looking for him, the first time outside of Leonard's. I tried to forget the dream, but couldn't. Had my morning coffee, drove the kids to school, came back to the house, made a few calls about possible gigs, drank more coffee, smoked a cigarette, read the paper, downed another cup of coffee. But no matter what I did, the dream wouldn't leave me, so I picked up my guitar to see if I could recreate the haunting melody I had heard in my sleep. I couldn't salvage the song. I heard only fragments. The more I tried to reconstruct the dream, the further it floated away from me. That's when I decided to go back to Leonard's to see if the guy was still there. My old Fairlane was on its last legs, coughing and belching, somehow made it downtown. With the holiday over, I was worried that the peddler had moved on. I wasn't sure why I was taking the time to look for him, hustling my music. That's what I needed to do. The gig at Bill's was still on, but the place was feeling the effects of the post-holiday doldrums. Come January, folks were partied out. Half of me was hoping that the legless man wouldn't be there. That way, I could just put him out of my mind. But the other half, the half that probably speaks for my conscience, was pushing me on. Can't explain why. I needed to see him. All I can tell you is that I did. He was there. He was in the exact same spot where I'd seen him last time. He was there on the wooden board, wearing the same tattered sweater and jeans, crying out with those same sing-song words, "That is pretty paper, pencils, and ribbons." Unlike last time, though, the street was not crowded with shoppers. A few women, a few kids, a few businessmen, but nobody taking note of him, nobody giving him the time of day. I parked across the street and walked over to greet him. "Hey, man," I said. "Last time I came looking for you, it seemed like you were blown away in a blizzard." "Why were you looking for me?" he asked in a Texas accent that echoed my own. "Needed some of the wrapping papers and ribbons. Well, you found me now." "To tell you the truth, I don't need them anymore." The man didn't say anything. Didn't register, disappoint, didn't blink. Stoic as a stone. "Just wanted to introduce myself," I said, extending my hand. "I'm Willie." He took my hand and shook it. Strong grip. "Vernon Clay." "Nice meeting you, Vernon. You from around here?" "Not far." Vernon Clay wasn't exactly interested in striking up a conversation. He averted his eyes and, using his arms to turn his body away from me, started arranging his papers and pencils. I wasn't sure what to say. I could simply tell him the truth, that I was curious about who he was and how he got here. But somehow those words didn't come out. Instead, I said something stupid. I said, "Tough way to make a living." Vernon turned back toward me. His eyes were hard. His eyes said what I already knew. Dumb comment. Obvious comment. Insensitive comment. Trying to recover, I said, I hear you singing and figured you for a musician. Several seconds passed before Vernon said, you figured right. Me too, I said. I'm a picker and a songwriter and something of a singer. Good for you. I could understand his sarcasm. He just wanted to be left alone to sell his wares. Part of me thought it best to leave him alone, but that other part of me that got me there, that curious part, made me stand my ground. Several awkward seconds of silence passed. Vernon finally said, look, mister. Willie, I corrected him. Okay, Willie. If you're a songwriter, you need pencils. I do. Fact is, I'm clean out of pencils. I'll buy half a dozen. That'll be $1.50. I gave him $2. Keep the change. Thanks. He handed me 6 pencils. Transaction complete. Now that I was a paying customer, I figured I had the right to ask him a couple more questions. But right about then, a talkative woman in a wide-brimmed cardinal red hat came up to him and started asking about his wrapping paper and ribbons. He turned his attention to her. I didn't want to be a nuisance, so I took my pencils and went home. I felt a little frustrated I hadn't learned a damn thing about him, but being a private person myself, who was I to pry into this guy's life? He had a certain pride that should be respected, and that was that, except it wasn't. So that's chapter 2. Chapter 3 will be back to big bills. I hope you're enjoying the story. I'll be back when I have time. Don't forget to stop and smell the flowers. And you probably noticed in here when he's referring to his curiosity, hence the name of our channel, Living Curiously. We are very curious ourselves. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. See you soon. Bye. I'm going to try to read chapter 3 of Pretty Paper, the Willie Nelson Christmas Tale. Chapter 3 is back to big bills. By early February, business had picked up at Big Bill's. I'd put together a little band and built up enough of a following to where I could work 5 nights a week. I was also coming up with a few ideas for new songs. I'm one of those writers who can't force it. Like babies, songs come down the chute when they're good and ready. Unlike children, though, songs don't have a gestation period you can roughly measure. Some songs take years to come alive. Those are the years when your unconscious mind is doing the work. You gotta be patient. I learned that early on. But this one song I called Pretty Paper found its way into the world damn fast. Naturally, it was based on seeing Vernon Clay that snowy day in December. That convinced me that the emotions I was feeling for him, whether it was curiosity or sympathy, was real. The mystery surrounding the man really intrigued me. Of course, the song didn't answer any questions or give a clue to his story because I really didn't know his story. The song merely set the scene that was still so vivid in my mind. I guess my reasoning was that now that the song was written, I didn't have to solve his mystery. He could remain a question mark, a man frozen in time whose past, present, and future would always be unknown. And then, wouldn't you know it, he reappeared out of nowhere. Well, not exactly nowhere. Big Bill's is definitely somewhere. It's a rough and tumble barroom, uncomfortably close to the slaughterhouses. I say uncomfortably because if the wind's blowing in a certain direction, the air isn't exactly perfumed. There's no sign outside, just a neon replica of a bottle of Pearl beer. There didn't need to be any sign because everyone in the neighborhood knows Big Bill. For years, he worked on the kill floors where the cattle are slaughtered. That's where he got into a fight with one of his bosses, who Big Bill caught short-changing him. He slit the man's throat. The man survived, and Bill served 6 years for attempted murder. Once out, he was recruited by Nathan Nutsy Perkins, a well-known gangster, as an enforcer. At 6'6" and 300 pounds, Bill was good at his job. But he soon tired of doing Nutsy's dirty work and quit. This was unusual. No one quit Nutsy, at least no one who values his life. But, as testimony to Bill's menacing stature, Nutsy let him walk away. Fact is, Nutsy owned the building where Bill put his bar. Rumor was Nutsy was so anxious to stay cool with Bill that he didn't even charge him rent. That's my dog you probably hear in the back. From time to time, you'd see Nutsy and some of his boys at the bar. Nutsy was a talker. He had an opinion about everything. Sorry, she's distracting me being crazy. Especially the local politicians. He liked to brag how most of them were in his pocket. He come to Fort Worth from Chicago as a teenager and never lost that Midwestern nasal twang. He had a lanky frame, a long nose, dark thinning hair, and alert eyes the color of dark chocolate. He usually wore a white fedora with purple feather on the brim. No Western get-up for Nutsy. He went for pinstripe suits, white shirts, and white silk ties. He also had no taste for music. Didn't matter who was on the bandstand, Nutsy never shut up, unless Big Bill told him to. Because Big Bill liked music, he respected musicians. I first won him over when I played Blue Christmas. He especially appreciated that I sang Ernest Tubbs' version, not Elvis's. Towering over everyone as he stood behind the bar, Bill was serving up drinks when, hearing the song, he cracked a broken-tooth smile that lit up his scarred face. When I sang Tubbs' Waltz Across Texas, I saw tears in his eyes. Mom and Daddy used to dance to that old tune, he told me later that night. The same December night he hired me to play weekends. Big Bill also prided himself on maintaining the best jukebox in the city. Of course, there were the current hits of Porter Wagner, George Jones, Buck Owens, Patsy Cline, but Bill also loaded it up with his favorite singers from the bygone era. Eddie Arnold, Lefty Frizzle, Hank Thompson, and of course, Hank Williams and his Drifting Cowboys. Every night around closing time, Bill would walk over to the jukebox, and while he cleaned up, he'd play Williams' Lovesick Blues 4 times in a row. The crowd at Big Bill's could get rowdy. It was a place where men came looking for women, and women, some of them pros, were just as rowdy as the men. You'd see an occasional fist fight or knife fight, but because of Big Bill's reputation as an enforcer, you wouldn't have to worry about shootings. The bandstand rickety old planks ran across the back wall to where I could see who was coming in and heading out. There were no tables or chairs. You either drank at the long bar or just stood around. Dancers tended to dance right in front of the bandstand. If the music was right, though, folks would be dancing all over the place. The sign said it was unlawful to have more than 80 people in there, but on a good Saturday night, at least twice that number of party people were packed in like sardines. It was on such a Saturday night, a chilly night in late February when I was feeling especially good. I had finally found a drummer who understood my personal sense of rhythm. Not everyone does, but Brother Paul, a Fort Worth native, did. If I ran a little ahead or lagged a little behind, Paul followed me. He sensed where I wanted to go. He was also at home at a joint like Big Bill's. He was friends with Big Bill and had done business with Nutsy Perkins. Here's a little picture of the jukebox. Cool jukebox. Paul knew his way around the underside of the city. In his wide-brimmed black hat, his red-lined black cape, and his shit-kicker boots, he made a statement. I am here, and I've got your back. He also packed heat and wasn't shy about letting shady promoters know it. Brother Paul turned out to be a rock-solid bandmate and protective friend. On that particular night, I didn't need protection. There was a warm feeling all around. Big Bill was happy that I played a few of his favorite by Bob Wills and Gene Autry. The crowd seemed to like my rendition of hits by Johnny Cash and Marty Robbins, like Ring of Fire and El Paso. I snuck in a couple of my originals that went over pretty good. In between numbers, I could hear Nutsy Perkins yakking at the bar. When I started singing, I also saw Big Bill give him the high sign to shut up. Only Big Bill had the balls to do that. If I'm to be honest, and I always try to be, I had my eye on a little lady that looked like she had her eye on me. She'd been coming to Bill's nearly every Saturday since I started there. My marriage was going through a bumpy stage, and I guess you could say that I was easily tempted. Hell, bumpy stage or not, I've always been easily tempted. This gal stood about 5'5" with long black hair, flashing dark eyes, and curves in all the right places. Sometimes she came in with a man, and sometimes she came in alone. Tonight she was alone. Right in front of the bandstand, she even danced alone, swaying back and forth to the songs I was singing. As she swayed, she kept her eyes on me, and quite naturally, I offered her a big smile. I found this flirtation so exciting that I ended the set early in order to make her acquaintance. Turned out her name was Barbara Lou. She worked as a beautician in Arlington and had aspirations of becoming a singer. She told me she also wrote songs. I said I'd love to hear them. Oh, they're not nearly as good as yours, she said. They're silly ideas, just little poems. Far as songs go, I said, the simpler the better. A lot of songs began as poems. Let me hear one of yours. Right here? Why not? They're all about love, she said. Well, the world can always use another love song. Might be easier to let you hear one if there wasn't so many people around. How about after the show, I suggested. Well, maybe, she said, with what sounded like an insincere hesitancy. I got one more set. Any requests? Something you wrote. I was actually thinking about singing something I wrote about Christmas time. It's a different kind of song for me, a holiday song. A moody holiday song, a little bit of a sad holiday song. Well, I'd love to hear it. That's all the encouragement I needed to sing Pretty Paper in public for the first time. I'd gone over it with my bass player and Brother Paul a few days earlier. It was an easy song to play. I figured it was good to end a long night on a calm, thoughtful note. The last set started with a couple of up-tempo tunes. The place had thinned out a bit, but there were folks who still wanted to dance. I slowed it down for all the hopeful guys who needed cheek-to-cheek time to make their final plea. Then after a couple of ballads, I got ready to sing Pretty Paper. I'm not one to talk much on the bandstand. I hardly ever introduce songs. I learned that as a kid watching Bob Wills. Folks don't come to hear you talk. They come to hear you play. Singing Pretty Paper for the first time in public gave me a real eerie feeling on that Saturday night. Actually, it was nearly 3 a.m. on Sunday morning. I felt a chill pass over me. The chill seemed to affect everyone. As I sang, the room froze. Dancers stopped dancing, people stopped talking, even Nutsy clammed up. Behind the bar, Big Bill stood still as a statue. Maybe it was my imagination, but I got the idea everyone was fixated on the story I was singing. Pretty paper, I sang, pretty ribbons of blue, crowded streets, busy feet, hustle by him. Downtown shoppers, Christmas is nigh. There he sits all alone on the sidewalk, hoping that you won't pass him by. Should you stop? Better not. Much too busy, you're in a hurry. My, how time does fly. In the distance, the ringing of laughter, and in the midst of the laughter he cries, pretty paper, pretty ribbons of blue. When I got through, I had a lump in my throat. I saw that Barbara Lou had tears in her eyes. That's it, folks, I said. Thanks for coming out. Be careful getting home, and see you next time. My initial idea was to make a bedtime for Barbara Lou. Excuse me, that's silly. Beeline for Barbara Lou and see exactly what she had in mind. But as I walked off the bandstand, she had melted into a crowd. Hoping she hadn't already left, I looked outside. That's when I saw Vernon. The same Vernon Clay I'd seen at Leonard's. Roll by on his board. Could be no mistake. It was definitely Vernon. Had he been in the club when I was singing the song and I just hadn't seen him? Did the song piss him off? And did he take off in a hurry? Or was he just passing by and hadn't heard me at all? One way or another, I had to know. I had to catch him. I quickly made my way to the door, but before I could get there, a bear of a man grabbed me by my arm. You've been chasing after my woman, he said in a drunk voice, and let me know he was out of his drunk mind. I saw his eyes were raging red. I also saw a switchblade in his right hand. Standing next to him was sweet Barbara Lou. She just shrugged her shoulders as if to say, I didn't know this would happen. What happened next was that switchblade sprang open, then the man sprang for my throat. It all happened in an instant. With no time to react, I saw my life flash before my eyes. But fate interceded. A split second before the blade reached my skin, an empty bottle of Lone Star beer came crashing down on my assailant's head. The man crumbled to the floor. I wasn't scratched. Standing over the guy with a broken bottle in his hand was my drummer, Brother Paul. Not missing a beat, Paul stomped on the man's hand. The blade went flying across the floor and stopped at the bar stool where Nutsy Perkins was sitting. Your drummer's good, said Nutsy. He's right on time. Throw the bum out of here, Big Bill ordered. Brother Paul picked up the man, who was half conscious, and flung him on the sidewalk. In all the confusion, Barbara Lou had managed to disappear, and in even more disturbing, so had Vernon. Okay, so the next chapter will be Sunday School. Hope you're enjoying the book. See you next time. Bye.
If I can't keep my head held high enough, I'll just speak love and watch the smiles come.
Thanks for watching.
Bring my spirits up.
Don't forget to stop and smell the flowers.
There's some shit I like to fix, but I still know that I'm blessed.